Hello and welcome. I hope you're doing well, and thanks so much for being here. I am here in the hope that this will be of use to you somehow. I find that whether it be in person and while co-regulating with other humans, as well as online, I don't even need to look at someone. I can listen to long podcasts, and those ideas, they excite me, they entice me. As I mentioned, I have a very overactive mind, probably. At any rate, blah, 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 right? So I really kind of came at this whole endeavor, one, as a way to work with my own clinging, my own anger. I admit it. I'm not awake. If you've never listened to this podcast, let me just preface this right now. I am not awake. And if you're wholly Buddhist, then I'll say I'm quite convinced, that I don't, whatever that means, whatever you think it means, I'm not it. And a lot of this began as an endeavor to work with my own angry mind. My very angry mind that had accumulated for just years and years and years of feeling misunderstood. Because I was misunderstood, and that's okay. I just didn't. I see that now. I've kind of worked through how much it reminded me of my childhood and all of the gestalt that's there and all the things that we do that some people claim don't exist. Good luck with that. All of that, it helped me with that. At this point, it ebbs and flows. It continues to help me with that. It's the Dhamma, but it's also become a mechanism of, if there's anybody out there who likes long form podcasts like I do and feels that one benefits from consuming long form podcasts the way I know I benefit from consuming long form podcasts, that are just, anyway, I don't need to tell you what my tastes are, then I hope, this is for you. All right. So if you are here, right on. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here. And I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing here. This is, if you're new to the podcast, this is a book that someone I hope it's okay that I do this. I hope they're okay with it. It's a pretty big server, so I doubt they'll mind. But this is a book that was introduced to me by one of the, I don't know if he's still a moderator. I don't know, but one of the moderators of a really great Discord server that I think is absolutely amazing. And when I saw what they were doing there, I just thought it was wonderful, and it's called Meditation Mind. And so if you're out there somewhere, you're listening to this, you're getting any value from this, and you're looking and you're in your you use the Discord community, then I encourage you to type into the Discover tab, Meditation Mind, so that you can tap into this really beautiful community. They're not Buddhist, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're not into Buddhism and you're just kind of passing through here, just, kind of interested in what yet another white Western woman has to say about a 25-year, 100-year-old practice that happened in India, then that might give you some solace. That it is, it's secular in the sense that yes, there are people there that are religious. There are people there that are atheists. There are all kinds of people there. It's a really quite beautiful community. Yeah. So anywho, they introduced me to this book. And what is the book? This is a reading of On the Path, an anthology on the Noble Eightfold Path drawn from the Pāli Canon. And this book is written by Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, and he's an American Buddhist monk who's widely respected for his translations of Buddhist texts and his teachings on meditation and the Dhamma. And his works are deeply rooted in the Theravāda Buddhist tradition, emphasizing a direct, practical approach to the Buddha's teachings. And fortunately, for me, from where I'm standing, he put this in the Creative Commons. He in other words, he's letting humans, do projects like this. Take his book and read it. And as long as I'm not making any kind of profit off of it, which I'm not, then, I can do this. I can do this podcast. And so thank you for that. And I bow deeply to you. This book has been, this has been very rich. And I thank you for kind of proving a Sangha after a fashion as I continue to, navigate this life transition and settling in somewhere to get to the face-to-face Sangha that I'm really looking forward to sinking into. All right. Wow. So if you have been following along, then, wow, I kind of feel like, this is kind of, I don't know, it's very exciting for me. It's the very last episode of Right View. And this is episode 45. So just, excuse me, it's amazing to me that, it's taken this long to get here. But yeah, this is the very last chapter of Right View before we get into Right Resolve for the next episode. The second of the quote unquote rights in the Noble Eightfold Path, which is foundational to Buddhism. So let's get into it. And if you're following along in the book, and you'll notice in the description that you'll find the book here. You'll also find a link to the music that's in this particular episode. So we are on page, if you are following along in the book, the digital free book that you can get vis-a-vis the link in the description, we're getting into Sutta 133. And as I mentioned, we're winding down Right View. And I'm actually not really going to provide a recap here. I might suggest, I know this is something that I do when new seasons in TV that I love come out. Before I watch the new episode of the new season, I'll first go back and maybe watch either the whole episode or just maybe, the last 15 or 20 minutes of the last episode of the previous season. And that, that might be what I would recommend for you here. Otherwise, this is going to be wholly out of context for you in some aspects. But we're beginning with Sutta 133. And I want to make sure I have plenty of time for commentary, but I also want to make absolutely sure that I get through this particular quote unquote right today. So I'm just going to get right into it. And we're about, a little bit down on page 240, Sutta 133. When those contemplatives and Brahmins assert various types of theories, ellipses, on 62 grounds, that is an agitation and vacillation to be felt by those contemplatives and Brahmins who, not knowing, not seeing, are immersed in craving. Ellipses. That comes from contact as a requisite condition. Ellipses. That they would experience that other through contact. That isn't possible. Ellipses. They all experience that through repeated contact at the six sense media. For them, from feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging / sustenance. From clinging / sustenance as a requisite condition comes becoming. From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth. From birth as a requisite condition, then aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of stress and suffering. But when a monk discerns the origination, ending, allure, drawbacks of, and emancipation from the six sense media, he discerns what is higher than all of this. And that comes from DN1. Okay, so this is absolutely delicious. Of course, I had to, try to get a little bit of cultural context, why 62? What is this 62 number that this particular sutta is pointing to? 62 grounds. That is an agitation and vacillation to be felt by those contemplatives. So what are these 62? So I asked, once again, robot, however you may feel about it, that is what I did. I asked robot, once again, that are, trained in the Pāli Canon, etc. What is this 62? Where does this come from? So let me share with you what robot had to say about it. And again, fact check it yourself. I don't want to repeat myself. Yeah, you know the context of where I'm coming from. So you're an intelligent human. You hopefully don't rely on me for everything, right? That you know, if you're here at all, you know, you're critically thinking. So great, keep doing that. I'm using robot. So this is what robot had to say. And this is fascinating if this is in fact true. So it says that it's a taxonomy specifically for the philosophical positions that Brahmins of Buddha / Gautama's time held. And so in the last episode, or in the last section of Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu's book, the suttas were talking about, you know, how the Brahmins were kind of fighting, you know, about, you know, what is the truth and what is, you know, and so this to me is, again, it's kind of a continuation of this idea. So these 62 are views. They were existing philosophical views that Brahmins held at Buddha's time. And Robot here is saying that they were kind of metaphysical claims that were popular at the time. So these, apparently, Robot claims, these 62 are organized into 6 clusters of views. Eternalism, and apparently there are 18 types of that. And here, the Buddha is saying that this idea of eternalism is people or Brahmins of the time who held the view that the self is eternal. And interestingly, and you know, you do whatever you want to do with this. This is exactly what Robot said in relationship to eternalism. So I'm just going to read it to you verbatim. Robot says, talking about the clusters now. AI is breaking it down for me. Robot says, eternalism, and then in brackets, 18 types. And then AI starts with this: people who remember past lives wrongly. And then it has a little arrow, and it says the self is eternal. I realize that this may be where, you know, one among several places where Buddhism and monotheistic or kind of dualistic frames would depart. This does not mean that they can't get along. I'm just saying that they depart. They depart in terms of the view that is held about what, quote unquote, this is. So Buddha held that this eternalism, if what Robot is saying here is true, then he held this to be a wrong view. What that actually is remembering past lives wrongly. And how I'm interpreting that from my own practice and my own exposure to Buddhism throughout my life, is that where the West really kind of misunderstands karma or kama, Dhamma, where it misunderstands it, is it thinks that Buddhism is talking about reincarnation. It isn't. Buddhism doesn't hold a self. Reincarnation assumes a self that Buddhism doesn't hold. So it's just a different thing. You know, it's a different thing. That's all. It's just a different thing. We can't hold more than 2 views in our mind at the same time, or 1 rather, right? We don't have to apply a dualistic frame. That dualistic frame that even AI has, where it's constantly trying to force everything into a dualistic frame. Try it out sometimes. I study AI. Just try. Ask AI anything. And what it will do, it will automatically position a response, putting it into a dualistic frame. Pitting one view against another. Just in the language, linguistically it does it. It's such a trip. Anyway, I'm going way off the rails, but that's eternalism. So other types of, once again, these clusters of views that Brahmins held at Buddha's time. Partial eternalism. Robot says there's 8 types of that. Something is eternal. Something else is not. Again, I don't have enough knowledge to even know what that exactly means. I think I would definitely need to be a scholar, which I'm not. But again, you can do your own research. I'm telling you what Robot said. Robot that has access to thousands of scholars. And yeah, maybe you can find out some more information. But that's how Robot is interpreting this idea of partial eternalism, of which the Buddha said there are 8 types. Finite or infinite cosmos. Yeah, so the world is finite, it's infinite, or it's both. This is another view that was very popular at the time, and there were 4 types of that. Theory of fortuitous origin, 2 types of that. Robot calls that the world arises by chance. Non-postmortem survival. This is so interesting. It's like I wish I had the bandwidth to read multiple books at once, because this is like, I want to know more about this. So non-post-mortem survival, apparently 7 types of that. Again, do your own research. And apparently the claim here is after death, annihilation, extinction, etc. Yes, definitely not the Buddhist view. And then F, the nihilistic or suspended views. 23 types, apparently, says Buddha, of this in terms of views that Brahmins held during Buddhist time. And here Robot says views based on pure speculation, logic, or fear. Anyway, moving on. So there you go. Those are the 62. That last one is positively my favorite. Absolutely. Gotta love it. Percentage-wise, of course, that's the biggest percentage pot. Based on nothingness, based on pure conjecture, fear of your own death, etc. But there you go. So that's apparently what the 62 are. And I think I'm going to go ahead and keep on going here. But before I do that, let me just make sure that I actually addressed everything else that was written here. But when a monk discerns the origination, and again, this is, we've talked about this already, where that comes from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we can discern what is higher than all of this. Yeah, I didn't really speak to that, did I? So what is meant here, to my understanding, from what I have been taught from Buddhist teachers, this is what this idea means here. So once again, really important distinction here. Huge point of misunderstanding in the West, I think. The Buddha is not referencing a God here. The Buddha is not pointing to God. That's just not there in the text. I'm not saying, hey, you can do whatever you want to with all of that information. I'm just telling you that is not what is in the text. It doesn't mean a God. It doesn't mean a supreme being. It doesn't mean a Brahman, an eternal soul, a cosmic watcher. It doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean any of that in Buddhism. The entire point of the Brahmajala Sutta, and I'm sorry if I said that wrong, DN1, is that all metaphysical theories, including theistic ones, all theories, arise from contact, feeling, craving, speculation. All. And we talked about this a lot last week, or I should say he did, and I read, and we just, provided my peanut gallery about this quite a bit last week. And it was kind of, in a way, it was really sort of the through line of last week's reading. So in Buddhism, what this does mean is that when we understand this, we kind of transcend that whole metaphysical problem. So higher doesn't mean you're superior. Higher doesn't mean you're God. Higher doesn't mean you're better. Higher doesn't mean you're awake. Well, maybe here's where I live in modern days, and I didn't live in, I'm also a woman. None of you men are awake, okay? So I, understand that this is coming through me, okay? But what we're talking about here, higher just means a different kind of cognition. That's all that it means. One that you yourself can access vis-a-vis meditation. That's right, even if you're a emotional woman. So it's available. And what that different cognition is that you see the origination of experience for yourself. You see the ending of experience for yourself. You see how titillating and alluring all of that is for yourself. You see the drawbacks of that whole gestalt for yourself. And you see where the escape hatch is. And I don't like the word escape. Robot uses the word escape. And, in the introduction, Ṭhānissaro, is talking about the fire escape. And again, I'm not a scholar. I'm not a big fan of the word escape. I would say that's the last thing that you're doing when you're meditating. That is the opposite of what you're doing when you're meditating. You most certainly are not escaping. You're going directly in, the opposite of escape. But I think simply what he means here is, how do we kind of break free of that cognitive / embodied cognitive / whatever kind of trap that we can get ourselves into, is that realization. It's kind of like a phenomenological insight that has nothing to do with theology at that level. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to keep on going. Sutta 134. What do you think, Malunkyapata? The forms cognizable via the eye that are unseen by you, that you have never before seen, that you don't see, and that are not to be seen by you. Do you have any desire or passion or love there? No, Lord. The sounds cognizable via the ear, ellipses. The aromas cognizable via the nose, ellipses. The flavors cognizable via the tongue, ellipses. The tactile sensations cognizable via the body, ellipses. The ideas cognizable via the intellect that are uncognized by you, the you have never before cognized, that you don't cognize, and that are not to be cognized by you. Do you have any desire or passion or love there? No, Lord. Then Malunkyapata, and I'm sorry if I looked it up, okay? And it's not for lack of looking it up. It's that I've never pronounced this before, so my apologies if I didn't get that right. Then Malunkyapata, with regard to phenomena to be seen, heard, sensed, or cognized, in reference to the seen, there will be only the seen. In reference to the heard, only the heard. In reference to the sensed, only the sensed. In reference to the cognized, only the cognized. That is how you should train yourself. When for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the cognized in reference to the cognized. Then, Malunkyapata, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here, nor there, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. And that comes from SN 35:95. So as not to break it up, I'm going to continue reading and then I'll take a look at these two suttas together in context at the end of this next sutta, Sutta 135. Then Venerable Kaccayana Gota approached the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, Lord, right view, it is said, to what extent is there right view? By and large, Caccanya, this world is supported by / takes as its object a polarity, that of existence and non-existence. But when one sees the origination of the world with right discernment, as it has come to be, non-existence, with reference to the world, does not occur to one. When one sees the cessation of the world with right discernment, as it has come to be, existence, with reference to the world, does not occur to one. By and large, Caccanya, this world is in bondage to attachments, clingings, and biases. But one such as this does not get involved with or cling to these attachments, clingings, fixations of awareness, biases, or obsessions. Nor is she resolved, I did that, it says he, but that's right, you heard it. Nor is she resolved on myself. I'll go back to he, for respect. He has no uncertainty or doubt that mere stress, when arising, is arising. Stress, when passing away, is passing away. In this, his knowledge is independent of others. It's to this extent, Caccanya, that there is right view. All exists. That is one extreme. All doesn't exist. That is a second extreme. Avoiding these two extremes, the Tathagata teaches the Dhamma via the middle. From ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. From fabrications as a requisite condition comes consciousness. From consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. From name and form as a requisite condition comes the six sense media. From the six sense media as a requisite condition comes contact. From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging / sustenance. From clinging / sustenance as a requisite condition comes becoming. From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth. From birth as a requisite condition, then aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of stress and suffering. Now, from the remainderless dispassioning and cessation of that very ignorance comes the cessation of fabrications. From the cessation of fabrications comes the cessation of consciousness. From the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of name and form. From the cessation of name and form comes the cessation of the six sense media. From the cessation of the six sense media comes the cessation of contact. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feeling. From the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of craving. From the cessation of craving comes the cessation of clinging / sustenance. From the cessation of clinging / sustenance comes the cessation of becoming. From the cessation of becoming comes the cessation of birth. From the cessation of birth, then aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair all cease. Such is the cessation of this entire mass of stress and suffering. And that comes from SN 12:15. So this is, I know I always say this, but it's genuinely how I feel. This is so rich. So this idea, let me go back here to the beginning of Sutta 134, bottom of page 240. So the Buddha begins with, what do you think? I just looked this up and I listened to it too. Maluni Kaputa. So sorry. Definitely don't mean to disrespect. The forms cognizable via the eye that are unseen by you, that you have never before seen, that you don't see, and that are not to be seen by you. Do you have any desire or passion or love there? So in other words, if I'm not experiencing it, if I'm not seeing it, hearing it, smelling it right now, there's a plane going over my head. That is the reality. Right now, in my physical world, as I speak to you in this microphone, there is a plane that is flying over my head. It is producing a sound. From the hearing of that six sense media, from my ability to hear, and then to hear the plane flying overhead, all kinds of fabricated phenomena begin to dance the dance. You know, my mind could be, gets distracted. Damn it, now I'm gonna have to do the plane. Or it could just be a noting and then return. Regardless, the plane's flying over the head, produces sound. I have the ability to hear. I hear the sound. If I hadn't heard that sound, there would be no story there because I didn't hear the sound. So it sounds deceptively obvious and simple, yet somehow we complicated Homo sapiens. It's really not that simple for us. It's also a very dangerous idea. And I think, to my view anyway, and no, I don't really recall that anybody's ever told me this, a teacher, or I read it. It might just be, a accumulation of my experiences. But the thought that just occurred to me is, it's probably why the Eightfold Path needs to be so central to Buddhism. Because when you really apply this idea, kind of use your own ability to critically think and to apply it downrange and to see what its maybe probable conclusion would be, it's terrifying. But deep down we know that it's true, right? I mean, anybody who works in advertising or in public relations profoundly understands this. Probably central, this again, I don't work in this field, but I did teach media for 20 years, so I'll just give you my opinion. Central to their vocation is putting it into the mind of others. If we can't see it, we don't hear it, we don't cognate on it, it doesn't exist. It's not our fault. Why would it exist if we can't hear it, see? What it makes me think of is, this was years ago, and I was dating a wonderful man, and I can't even remember if this is the exact story, but I know that this very lovely man had spent some time in a particular part of the world. And he had, in living there, I guess it was common, it was kind of like, I live in the United States, and I don't go to bars anymore, but no judgment. I'm just saying I don't go to bars anymore. But when I did go to bars, they would always have bowls of like nuts or peanuts, with the shell on or without the shell on. And it was kind of a fixture. You'd have a beer, you'd have a nut. In my case, you'd have a beer and then you'd pour all of the nuts into your handbag. No, I'm just kidding. But I guess in the region where he lived, it was kind of the same idea, but it was like crickets or something. It was like deep fried crickets or deep fried bug of some kind. And I remember him explaining to me a little bit about, what it was like. And I think I remember shuddering. I'm not sure. It was a long time ago. But I guess where I'm going with this is all we've got to go on is our sixth sense media. If we can't recognize that, we will never be able to cultivate compassion or self-compassion. Does that make sense? It's really important that we really, 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 really get that. It's nobody's fault. So anywho, and here's where the Buddha gets into the practice, and I realize how unbelievably difficult this is. But I really think that if we can begin to find it, again, now I'm speaking to anybody who's listening to this who, is maybe practicing Buddhism. I mean, I'm not saying this isn't for you if you're not. I'm just saying, hey, if you've committed to practicing Buddhism, I'm talking directly to you now. I'm challenging you now, she or he who claims to be practicing Buddhism. I realize this is really hard to do. But what the Buddha is challenging us to do here next is to not apply that story, to not apply the story. When I hear the plane flying over my head, to not apply the story. So sick of the airport. Man, why do they have to start the air so early? People should sleep. All the things that we do is all story, chatter, monkey mind, chatter, blah, 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 blah. That's stuff that we're adding on our quote unquote self. When experience is just experience, and I realize this is this is why the Eightfold Path is so core, because this is a very slippery, and it's it can sound, in application, it can sound again very dicey from an ethical standpoint, except that Buddhism is very ethical. So it's really important that you put all of this in context. That is why the Eightfold Path is foundational to Buddhism. The suffering self, when we're suffering, it's because of something that we added on. Our opinion, our interpretation of what was said, our fears, both rational and irrational, both known and unknown, because they're not available to us on a conscious level. Our desires, our feelings, right? Our whether or not our sense of self was insulted or not to our view. Status, story, praise, the whole gestalt of self. That's all stuff that we add on. We're adding that. He's saying that the felt sense of I doesn't really exist when you drop below it. Again, you're going to have to see that for yourself. You're never going to see that for yourself if you don't meditate. This is a really slippery slope for people. I don't really know how to talk about it. I'll just say that there is, more and more research coming out about therapy guided or, these are things to not trifle with, to not play with. And to my view, and I've talked about this in other episodes, but there are hallucinogenic drugs that we've known for quite a while can kind of help the mind to relax around that sense of I. And it can be very helpful to just kind of get a glimpse of it and be like, oh, it's pretty hard, I think, to understand the kind of the way of seeing the world like this particular view of seeing reality, unless maybe you've had a little peek for yourself. And the Buddha says that a lot, right? See for yourself, see for yourself, see for yourself, see for yourself, see for yourself. Now, he doesn't say see for yourself by dropping acid, and that is definitely something that, back in my youth, I did a lot of acid, I did a lot of mushrooms, I did a lot of stuff. But I told you, I struggle with bulimia. My dad, love you, Papa, but it runs in my family and all that stuff. I'm not talking about anybody else in my family. My father, we talked about it much. He was very open about it himself. At any rate, science is beginning to understand that what wisdom traditions, natural traditions, and where I live, probably indigenous traditions, which I don't know anything about. So I don't want, again, I'm trying to be respectful. Maybe already understood on some level. I mean, I think to my view, on some level, none of us are beyond, it doesn't really matter what we're practicing. What Buddhist psychology is talking about, the Homo sapien experience. You know, the religious identity, the cultural identity, that's all superimposed by our sense of I, me, mine. I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm just saying that is what it is. But on a certain level, he's talking about human psychology. You know, he's not talking about, you know. So anyway, I'm going way off the rails here. But yeah. So then in Sutta 135, you know, once again, he's kind of diagnosing what's going on with us, speaking of Homo sapiens, us humans. And he's saying that most of us are kind of trapped in a very kind of in dualism. This or that, you know, everything exists, nothing exists. And both of these, to Buddha's view, are fueled by craving, you know, or aversion, ignorance. Both of them, to his view, create suffering, create stress. They're both stories, both ways of grasping at that which cannot be known, at certainty, right? I gotta be right, I'm right, this is right. Again, going back and, you know, earlier in the episode. And so then he offers the middle way, right? And, you know, I think most people can recognize oftentimes that expression is associated with Buddhism, you know, the middle path, the middle way. So what is the middle way? He's talking about it right here. He's not talking about compromising. He's not talking about, it's a completely different lens. It's a completely different perspective, a completely different way to view reality. It's a noticing. And it's not like, for me personally, I spend any time, you know, in my life when I'm talking to people or I'm out and about, you know, and I'm talking to people I know, or I'm talking to people I don't know, and, you know, or I'm online and or I'm not, it's not like I'm, for me personally, as someone who practices, you know, Buddhism to the, you know, to the best of my ability, I'm not a nun. All he's saying is that we humans see phenomena arising and we see it ceasing according to our conditions. Bing! Period. He's just saying it's not, you know, it happens. They happen. That's what he's saying. It happens. They happen. They occur. Experience is constructed, dependent on conditions that, you know, the book has already talked about, Buddha talked about, and it's really only felt by us as the experiencer, as real, quote unquote, when the conditions that lit the flame or kind of are there. When conditions shift, experience shifts. Nothing more is needed. That's it. That's all. That's his claim. So where I think that this can maybe we might tense up in hearing this, because it can sound like, it can sound like we're just kind of throwing the Homo sapien experience, regardless of what it is, kind of into the deep end of the pool. You just got to change your relationship to what's arising. That's your problem, man. Yeah, just do a bunch of mantras. Do yoga. Do a bunch of yoga. Yeah, that'll fix it. Now, I'm not saying that these things, if you follow the podcast, you know that I do yoga most days. So I'm not, this is no bash on yoga. I'm trying to point to something here that kind of distinguishes it from, you know, all of that, all of those things that we do, we are doing to, I'm trying to get to the word here. We are doing that. When I do yoga, when I get up every morning to meditate, I get up very early. I set my alarm. I deliberately go to bed to make sure I get plenty of rest so that I can get up to do meditation. So that is an ego doing that, right? That requires effort, that requires action, so there is discernment here. The Buddha's not saying, hey, yeah, you're being sexually violated, no problem. Yeah, see, the trouble's you and the way you're looking at it. That is not what the Buddha's saying, man. And if I were you and somebody told you that and you were a chick that was violated, I'd bitch slap that person if I wasn't Buddhist. Anywho, what he's saying is that is a reality. And as we've already discussed, or Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu has already discussed, and, you know, you'll learn if you practice Buddhism in any real way, how critical discernment is in Buddhism and how thoroughly it should be taught And I would definitely look for a community. If you're interested in Buddhism and you live in the West like I do, really make sure that you're really looking at a community that emphasizes the Eightfold Path, because it is, if they're not emphasizing the Eightfold Path, it's not Buddhism. And I've said that before. It's something else. Maybe they borrowed from Buddhism, and that's fine. It's just not Buddhism. If you want to learn Buddhism and follow Buddhism, then just check out, or you want to know more about, I'm not saying Buddhism is right? This whole thing. We all have the mind that we have. If someone wants to understand Buddhism, it's because their mind wants to understand Buddhism. If you don't want to understand Buddhism, it's because your mind doesn't want to understand it. It doesn't make you right. It doesn't make them right. It's phenomena arising. So he's not saying don't be discerning here. Not at all. Not at all, He's just explaining what's actually happening. To my mind, really understanding this kind of helped me in incredible ways to be discerning. It's why my comments are closed on this podcast. It's why, I coach people, and it's also why I work with myself. Women have been subservient to men for a really long time. You don't have to like what I'm saying. It really is just the truth. Yeah, if you don't dig it, you can just, keep on moving. But, we really kind of have been considered lesser than. Religions, even Buddhism, has considered women the weaker sex. I'm not really sure precisely what the gripe was. I have to assume, and I've talked about this before in the podcast, that I have to assume that it's more about the feeling state. Okay, so anyway, I think I'm going to keep on moving here. But really, when the Buddha says only the seen in the seen, he's not shutting down this idea of discernment. Not at all. He's making it possible. Because you can't discern if you haven't cultivated the skill of discernment. If there's no discerning of skill there, or skill of discernment that's been cultivated, then you can't do the next part. It wouldn't be possible. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just walking in circles, and I hope that made sense. But let's keep on going. And so once again, I'll go ahead and read a couple of suttas back to back, beginning with Sutta 136 at the top of page 243. From the abandoning of craving, action, in brackets, kama, is abandoned. From the abandoning of action, stress is abandoned. Thus, udayin, from the ending of craving comes the ending of action. From the ending of action, the ending of stress. And that comes from SN 46:26. Sutta 137. There is the case, Moggallana, where a monk has heard, all Dhammas are unworthy of attachment. Having heard that all Dhammas are unworthy of attachment, he directly knows every Dhamma. Directly knowing every Dhamma, he comprehends every Dhamma. Comprehending every Dhamma, then whatever feeling he experiences, pleasure, pain, neither pleasure nor pain, he remains focused on inconstancy, focused on dispassion, focused on cessation, focused on relinquishing with regard to that feeling. As he remains focused on inconstancy, focused on dispassion, focused on cessation, focused on relinquishing with regard to that feeling, he is unsustained by, and in brackets he put, doesn't cling to, anything in the world. Unsustained, he is unagitated. Unagitated, he totally unbinds right within. He discerns. Birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world. It's in this respect, Moggallana, that a monk, in brief, is released through the ending of craving, utterly complete, utterly free from bonds, a follower of the utterly holy life, utterly consummate, foremost among devas and human beings. And that comes from AN 7:58. Wow, so let's dig into this. And again, I'm going to be using online sources, including AI, to help me make sure that I have a cultural context for this, particularly Sutta 137, this last one here, before I talk about it. So I'll be right back. And yeah, let's get into this. So I'm struck, as we come to the end of chapter 3 and right view, which is typically presented first when the Noble Eightfold Path is presented to students of Buddhism who are learning, about what all of this is, kind of what anyway, blah, blah, blah. So he's really getting into the weeds here about the kind of phenomenological experience of, Buddhism uses the word liberation a lot, and it feels so kind of hyperbolic. Even right now, as I said the word, I kind of cringed to myself a little bit, like, oh God, I rolled at myself. It does feel liberating. It does feel profoundly liberating to see this for yourself. You can have a direct experience. I mean, I think typically people historically, there's so much going on here, but there have been people in the world that have existed that have described experiences like this, experience dropping away, our mental kind of need to construct and name and form, to be constructing, creating, our perception, our sensation. Our whole identity formation drops away. It can be experienced. Humans have experienced it. It's been studied. It continues to be studied. The research on that is growing, not shrinking. One can see for oneself that all of that is unstable. It's not reliable. It's constructed. It's fabricated. Direct knowing is not intellectual. It is not an intellectual process. It's phenomenological. It's experiential. It's that moment when the mind recognizes itself. When this is why, to my view, I have to assume this is why a lot of Buddhist monks and nuns who teach Buddhism in the West. I've had multiple teachers. I've mentioned I've lived all over the country in the United States, moved around a lot throughout my life, had multiple teachers from different parts of the country, from New York to California, and they share a technique. And to my view, they are all teaching this because they learned it, and I have to assume they learned it because of this. So when you're learning to meditate, oftentimes in a Buddhist community, and you're receiving instruction on concentration meditation, we'll be talking about that a lot in the book. Well, I don't know if it'll be a lot because I don't pre-read this book, but I know it'll come up because it's key in Buddhism. But you'll be trained to follow the breath, putting your attention at the nostrils. There's a lot more going on. I'm not going to do a training on that right now, but one thing that they'll typically say, is, and if you notice that your mind is wandering, notice what the mind is doing. And maybe it's not even mind. So when I was learning, it would be things like, okay, so is it internal or external? In other words, is what I'm experiencing coming from inside my body? Maybe I'm nauseous. Maybe I'm angry and my stomach is all tied up in knots, maybe I'm tired, I'm sleepy, having a hard time staying awake. Or maybe it's external. The person next to me farted and it smells. I do stuff like this to be cheeky, but it's also dead serious. And if you go back and you listen to earlier, I don't remember which episode it is where I talked about. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. And doing retreats is really great. Just being in community when you can't speak or make eye contact is a trip. But I was talking about a retreat that I went to where you can't speak or make eye contact with anybody for like 11 days, I think is what it was. But you're in a big room and all the blinds are kind of pulled. Then the light can still get in, but it's dark in there. The lights are very low. And everybody's, there's no, maybe I'm not remembering this right, which is highly possible, but I don't remember there being a lot of air movement. And I went to this in the desert in California. So it was no, it wasn't freaking hot. It must have been. Anyway, I remember being cold at night. But when you are meditating for 9 hours every single day and you can't speak and you can't make eye contact and you are having your sense media forbidden, then you really see this stuff for yourself. You notice it. If you're practicing, you notice it, I also had to eat a particular diet at this retreat that is wholly not really good for me and makes me pretty sick. And so it was a struggle, and I just kind of got to sit with the struggle and be with the struggle. And I was very happy to return to my medically advised diet. I'm not saying that what they were doing wasn't medically advised. It's just that it's not quite that cut and dry as there just being one way. Again, fabrication, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to get into a debate about food on here. I'll just say that my eating that way really exacerbated some digestive issues that I've had most of my life. And it's also a diet that, just naturally makes people gassy. It just does. And oh my God, it smelled so effing bad in that meditation hall. It was crazy. And I remember, my mind, so getting into internal and external, I could say to myself, oh, no, it is external though, because they're the ones that are making us all eat this way. And everybody knows that this stuff's going to make this happen to you and blah, 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 blah. That was just my mind producing a narrative. Why was it producing a narrative? Because that's what the mind does. So that's what the mind does. It produces a narrative, and then we kind of follow the narrative, and then that feeds the narrative, and then it creates more narrative, which we then follow, and then there you go, right? So welcome to my brain, maybe yours, I don't know, I'm just saying. So it smelled really bad in there. And this is gonna sound gross, but I'm gonna say it. By day, maybe 6, maybe, of that. Please do not misunderstand me, okay? I'm not gonna say that I suddenly came to enjoy the savory, delightful aroma of mass fart. There's probably like 45 people in there farting. I'm sure they weren't all farting, but it reeked, okay? The place smelled terrible. But by day 6, it became more interesting than anything else. Kind of interesting / amusing. Almost like a fun point for me to get to practice with. And there were other opportunities where I got to have that playfulness around it as well. Oh, I've gone way off the rails. I really have gone way off the rails, and I really want to do get through this. So all I can really say about all of this is I hope that somewhere in all of that gobbledygook, which somehow in my mind ties to this, makes sense to you, what this can be for us when we get below the story. This is not to say that your story isn't relevant. That's not a thing that's happening in Buddhism. That's just not kind of working with the material that's there for your own benefit, for your own heart, for your own healing, for your own self-compassion, for your own compassion, 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 compassion. That's all. So yeah, I'm going to keep on going. Sutta 138. This monk's, the Tathagata discerns. And he discerns that these standpoints, thus seized, thus grasped at, lead to such and such a destination, to such and such a state in the world beyond. and he discerns what is higher than this. And yet discerning that, he does not grasp at that act of discerning, and he is not grasping at it, unbinding. And then in brackets, nibbutthi, and I hope I said that right, is ending, allure, and drawbacks of feelings, along with the escape from feelings, the Tathagata monks, through lack of clinging / sustenance, is released. And that comes from DN1. And I'm going to go ahead and keep on reading. I feel like Sutta 138 here is really reiterating what I've already been talking about. So keep on going. Can't believe it. We're getting to the last subheading of chapter 3 and right view. On not confusing levels of right view is the name of this heading. Top of page 244. Sutta 139. Then Pāṭalaputta, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, the wanderer, while walking and wandering around to exercise his legs, went to Venerable Samiti and exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to Venerable Samiti, face to face with Gotama, the contemplative, "Have I heard this? Face to face have I learned this? Bodily action is barren. Verbal action is barren. Only mental action is true. And there is an attainment in which, on being attained, nothing is felt." Don't say that, friend. Don't slander the Blessed One, for it's not good to slander the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not say that. Bodily action is barren. Verbal action is barren. Only mental action is true. But there is, friend, an attainment in which, on being attained, nothing is felt. How long has it been, friend Samiti, since you went forth into homelessness? Not long, friend, 3 years. Then what now should I say about the elder monks, when a junior monk would suppose that his teacher is to be defended in this way? Having intentionally done an action with body, with speech, or with mind, what does one experience? Having intentionally done an action with body, with speech, or with mind, one experiences stress. Then Pāṭalaputta, the wanderer, neither delighted in nor scorned Venerable Samiti's words. Neither delighting nor scorning, he got up from his seat and left. And then in brackets here it says, Venerable Samiti reports this conversation to Venerable Ananda, who then, taking Samiti along, takes him to the Buddha and reports the conversation to him. When this was said, the Blessed One said, I do not recall even having seen Pāṭalaputta the wanderer, much less having that sort of discussion. And his question, which deserved an analytical answer, has been given a categorical answer by this worthless man Samiti. When this was said, Venerable Udayin said to the Blessed One, but what if Venerable Samiti was speaking in reference to this? Whatever it felt comes under stress. When this was said, the Blessed One said to Venerable Ananda, look, Ananda, at how this worthless Udayin interrupts. I knew just now that he would interrupt in an inappropriate way. From the very beginning, Pāṭalaputta the wanderer was asking about the 3 kinds of feeling. When this worthless Samiti was asked by him in this way, he should have answered, having intentionally done, with body, with speech, or with mind, an action that is to be felt as pleasure, one experiences pleasure. Having intentionally done, with body, with speech, or with mind, an action that is to be felt as pain, one experiences pain. Having intentionally done, with body, with speech, or with mind, an action that is to be felt as neither pleasure nor pain, one experiences neither pleasure nor pain. Answering this way, this worthless Samiti would have rightly answered Pāṭalaputta the wanderer, and that comes from MN 136. So there is so much cultural inference made here that I need to go do a little bit of research so that I can do my best to do it justice and really to understand myself, because remember, this is the first passage that Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, the author of this book, picked to fall under the subheading of on not confusing levels of right view. So I definitely want to unpack this, and I'll be right back. So here, apparently Padalaputta was a kind of a freelance spiritual seeker, which is kind of an easy reach. I mean, we have a whole lot of these kinds of people online, podcasters. This is a podcast, right? So Substack writers, YouTube gurus, I know the real teachings. This is the real way. Lots and lots of that happening today. And there was apparently, that was also happening in the Buddhist time. And so this wanderer approaches the monk Samiti, and he makes this claim, hey, I heard directly from the Buddha that the body doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Speech doesn't matter. Only the mind is real. Only the mind. And he's also claiming, and there's a state where nothing at all is felt. And apparently, this was a common view among rival teachers of the time. And here, I'm way out of my depth. So here you really, I strongly encourage you to fact check me. Remember that I'm using AI. And yes, it is trained on actual text, but I don't, go back and listen to other episodes of what I have to say about AI. And yes, I recognize that it's here and etc. But, it's sycophantic, it hallucinates, so please consider the source again. But according to AI here, Ajavikas and the Jain ascetics believe that the highest state that humans can attain is complete numbness. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but Robot says that was a popular view of the time of Buddha's time when he was teaching on the planet ball Earth. And, Samiti's trying to defend the Buddha, but he's inexperienced, and he's doesn't really have a good handle on it himself, so he's just kind of, and so they bring it to the Buddha, right? And the Buddha's, per the usual, pretty clear. I never said that. I never taught that. And Samiti wasn't really making the correct point to defend what I'm actually teaching. He was answering the wrong question, and he was answering it in the wrong way. So, Robot suggesting here that, he's not attacking Samiti, he's correcting the method, but yeah, worthless. Woo! Okay, so then the Buddha's saying, this is actually what I would have said to him if he had brought that notion to me. If you intend, I'm gonna read to you exactly what Robot said. Okay, when I do my usual prompting with Robot in relationship to this podcast. So this is a quote from Robot. I am a robot. I won't read it that way, I promise. Hello, my name is Robot. I will now attempt to sound human. Okay. If you intentionally act through body, speech, or mind, and that action is meant to produce pleasure, you feel pleasure. If it is meant to produce pain, you feel pain. If it's meant to produce neutral feeling, you feel neutral feeling. That's it. So the body does matter. Speech matters, mind matters, all of it matters. It's all part of the soup. It all matters. And feeling is not a problem. Clinging to the feeling as if it were the entirety of it, quote unquote, is the problem. And so I think, really this sutta here, as we come into this new subheading and the final subheading of Right View before we move into chapter 4 and Right Resolve for next time, it really just shows how easy it is to get lost in translation, to play the game of telephone when it comes to what people say, what they're actually saying, and how frequently the Buddha is misquoted. And you can already hear my own grappling with my own anger around how Buddhism has been colonized, to my view. Intentionally, at the time that it was, yeah, definitely intentionally. At that time, sure. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it. If we don't understand something, then we'll do anything to avoid cognitive dissonance. So of course it's intentional. We're trying to avoid cognitive dissonance. Sadly, the Buddha's not around anymore to say, I never said that. The path is not numbness, it's clarity. All right, I'm going to keep going. Sutta 140. And I just want to point out that this is the last sutta in chapter 3 in Right View. So, monks, it's not that I dispute with the world. but that the world disputes with me. A proponent of the Dhamma doesn't dispute with anyone with regard to the world. Whatever is agreed upon by the wise as not existing in the world, of that I too say, it doesn't exist. Whatever is agreed upon by the wise as existing in the world, of that I too say, it exists. And what is agreed upon by the wise as not existing in the world, that I too say it doesn't exist? Form that's constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, is agreed upon by the wise as not existing in the world. And I too say it doesn't exist. Feeling that's constant, perception that's constant, fabrications that are constant, consciousness that's constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, is agreed upon by the wise as not existing in the world. And I too say it doesn't exist. And what is agreed upon by the wise as existing in the world, that I too say it exists? Form that's inconstant, stressful, subject to change, is agreed upon by the wise as existing in the world. And I too say it exists. Feeling that's inconstant, perception that's inconstant, fabrications that are inconstant, consciousness that's inconstant, stressful, subject to change, is agreed upon by the wise as existing in the world. And I too say it exists. And that comes from SN 22:94. And here in brackets, Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu says, compare with Sutta 135 above. So I'll let you do that for yourself. So that is the end of chapter 3 and right view. I don't feel like I need to say a whole lot about this. And I love that it begins with, I'm not arguing with any of you. You're arguing with me. I'm saying that whatever it is that you believe to be it is also fabrication. It's, yeah, I oddly find myself, maybe you're happy to hear this, I oddly find myself going mute on this particular sutta. I just don't really know what else to say about it, other than that is right view. Typically, from my understanding, the first right, if you will, that Buddha presents in the full Eightfold Path. And I know that there's always going to be contention over everything. It's what we do. Darn our cognitive dissonance and need to be right, and how those two dance together in these weird tangos and waltzes and like Fight Club weirdness all the time. But it makes sense to me that this would be presented first, because I don't honestly know how any of the rest of it would feel important to you if you didn't get a little bit of access to this. And but what do I know? Because maybe, like, I'm trying to remember. Let's see. Maybe someone comes to all of this through vis-a-vis the body, through meditation or something happens, and then they get into the teachings. Like when I think about it, I didn't have words for it because I was really freaking young, or in my very, very young, my extreme youngs, and was playing around, with hallucinogens for a couple of years there, as so many of us were back in those days. And again, as I mentioned, kids will be kids. These are some of the things, some of these have been used by, ancient people for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And, we kind of come in and do what we do. I'll just say that the rumors or stories that you've heard are true. That you are accessing something that cannot be described. It can only be experienced. And as I've repeatedly said here, I don't know what any of it means. And I don't know that I'm particularly interested in what any of it means. I think it would be cool to know, I think it would just be, do I? I don't even know. Let me leave you with this weird story before I wrap up chapter 3. You're going to be like, what is happening? Okay. And I'm going to try to do this in such a way that doesn't draw attention to specifically who this person is, because I don't want to ruin it for you too. So I'm just going to say that I've always loved, even the genres is kind of, I'm just going to say, I've always loved science fiction from a very young age, and mysteries. I read a lot of, I've read every single Nancy Drew book that was ever written. And then as I got older, I got into more nonfiction, but, magic and esoteric, anyway, all kinds of stuff, read all kinds of stuff. When I was really, really young, I loved science fiction, particularly when I was a teenager. And there was a particular writer that I just happened to read one of their books at a particular point in my fabricated experience that had a huge impact on me. Why? Don't know. To this day, don't know / don't remember. And I don't want to say like what I did to kind of illustrate how much it meant to me, because then you might know who it is. So I'll just say that I don't regret it because I love it, but I did some things that really came from how much this particular book meant to me, how much it shaped me as a writer, how much it shaped every single thing I read, and how much it shaped how I thought about humans and how I thought about how we thought and how I thought about how we make meaning and how we tell ourselves these stories that we confuse with reality. And then I met this guy in real life, and he was such a fucking asshole. I mean, what a fucking dick this guy was. So I leave you with that. You're welcome. You're welcome. That's what I believe in. There is phenomena arising, and then there's the stories that we tell ourselves. And to my view, as we begin to get into right resolve and move in right, what does resolve mean? Yeah. What does resolve mean? I think for any of us to really get at right resolve, this really has to mean something for us. Again, I'm officially now can call myself a doctor of psychology, and I, from what I've studied and from my own personal, phenomenological experience, I would say that it's very, very hard to change behavior or to kind of be an advocate for ourselves in our own life if we don't have a sense of urgency around the things that we want to change. It's really hard, really hard. I think this is why we really just need to, I think just create a lot more spaciousness around what addiction actually is. And there's, I think, a particular point in the addictive process, regardless of whether someone is addicted to substances or processes, because you can get addicted to both, all of the above, one or the other, is there's usually a point in a human's experience of that right before either they make a change or they sink even deeper into the abyss. And it's kind of almost like back when I sat in 12-step rooms, I would hear people, I don't even know if I invented it or I heard it. Doesn't matter. We invented it. You guys know I cuss a little bit. It's part of what I do. But this actually is what it was called. You hear it in meetings in this particular town that I lived in. When you live in a really small town and you're going to a 12-step meeting, I mean, there's like one meeting, there's like 4 people. For so much of my recovery, I was at the same meeting with the same few people. The fuck it moment, or the fuck you moment, I think that's right. Now I remember who said it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh gosh, bless her. I just love her so much. Wow. Anywho, the fuck you moment. When you realize that you really get in your bones that you've now reached the point of diminishing returns in your relationship to what you're addicted to. And that means that you can no longer lie to yourself. I think I've mentioned before how much I love a guy named Charles Bukowski, and any woman that I've ever met who's familiar with him just is horrified when I say that, because I'm a woman. And, all outward appearances would suggest that he hated women, and he probably did. He probably did hate women. I don't know. But he was also so injured. We all are really, 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 really injured. We all are. Not just women. Men are too. We're all injured. But one of the things that I loved about him was his rawness around all of that. Just this stop fucking lying to yourselfness about him. That was a real wake-up call for me, ironically, given that he was an incredible alcoholic and died of it, even though he was a brilliant writer. Incredible writer, incredible. I believe. Again, what is it based on? My fabricated state. If you go back and you listen to earlier episodes, you know what I come from. You know what my early conditioning was like. Consider the source. Has a whole new meaning for you now, doesn't it? I want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. The next time I hear you, see you, whatever, feel you, we'll be getting into chapter 4 and right resolve. Please take good care. Bye.